Before the gas bill, before the electric bill, before the meter on your wall decided how warm your family was allowed to be, there was another system, a very different one. It could heat entire city blocks from a single underground network. It could warm offices, hotels, hospitals, and tenement apartments without forcing every tenant to install a boiler of their own. And what made it even more remarkable was this. It ran almost entirely on heat that otherwise would have been wasted anyway, thrown into the sky from factory smokestacks and power plant exhausts. It existed. It worked. And between 1877 and 1930, it spread to more than 100 American and Canadian cities. Then, in most places, it disappeared. Not because it failed, not because it became obsolete, not because the technology stopped working. It vanished because the business model it threatened was worth more to certain people than the infrastructure itself. This is the story of district steam heating. It is the story of how American cities once shared heat the same way they shared roads and water, as a public utility, as something tied to the grid rather than the meter. But the truth is, private energy interests eventually realized there was more money in selling warmth one household at a time. This is the story of infrastructure that worked too well, cost too little, and made the wrong people nervous. And it is not ancient history. Some of it, even now, is still running underneath your feet. There is a version of American energy history that most people learn in school, if they learn it at all. It usually goes like this. People used to burn wood and coal. Then Edison invented electricity. Then industry figured out how to heat and cool buildings. And now we have thermostats and monthly bills. That, supposedly, is just how progress works. The individual unit, the personal meter, the household account. But that version leaves out a great deal. It leaves out the engineers and city planners of the 1870s and 1880s who looked at the problem of urban heating and came to a completely different conclusion. It leaves out the decades when that conclusion dominated in forward-thinking cities. It leaves out the lobbying, the infrastructure choices, and the municipal contract battles that slowly unraveled what those engineers built. And it leaves out the countries, especially in Northern Europe, that never abandoned the model at all. They kept building it, they expanded it, and today, they heat a significant share of their national population through centralized district networks at a fraction of the fuel cost that American households pay. History did not have to unfold the way it did. That is the argument here, and the evidence begins under the streets of Lockport, New York. To understand why district heating mattered, you first have to understand what winter meant for an ordinary American before it existed. The year is 1870. You live in a mid-sized northeastern city, Rochester, Albany, or Providence. Your building has no central heat. There is a fireplace in the main room and a cast iron stove in the kitchen. Those are the only warm places in your life. The bedrooms are cold. The hallways are cold. The outhouses behind the building are so bitterly cold that people avoid them until the last possible moment, and that, naturally, creates its own category of public health problems. You buy coal or wood, and the price of that fuel swings wildly based on supply chains you do not control. A bad winter, a labor stoppage at the mines, a rough season on the freight rail lines. Any one of those can double or triple the cost of staying warm. Poor families in tenement districts often cannot afford to keep fires burning through the night. Children sleep under every blanket the family owns. Pipes freeze. People die from cold-related illness at rates modern Americans would struggle to comprehend. The wealthy solved this problem, the only way wealth often solves things, by burning more coal. But that required servants to tend the fires, and it meant thick smoke hanging over nearly every American city from October through March. Urban air quality in major northeastern cities during the 1860s and 1870s was, by modern standards, catastrophic. Every building heating itself independently meant every building producing its own combustion exhaust. The cumulative result was a permanent brown haze over every city of significant size. That was the problem a civil engineer in western New York sat down to solve in 1876. His name was Birdsill Holly. He was not famous then. He is not famous now. And that, really, tells you something about whose names history chooses to preserve and whose it quietly forgets. Holly had spent his career working on water distribution systems. The pressurized pipe network cities were beginning to build to replace individual wells. He understood pressure. He understood flow. He understood that the logic of a network, one source and many delivery points, worked for water. So he began asking whether it could work for heat as well. The concept he developed was straightforward in principle. Build a central boiler plant, heat water until it produces steam, run insulated pipes underground throughout a district of the city. Buildings connect to those pipes, steam flows in, releases heat, condenses back into water, and returns through a second pipe to the central plant to be reheated. Every building on the network receives heat without needing its own boiler. One combustion source, one maintenance point, one smoke source instead of hundreds. Holly spent a year developing the technical specifications and pitching the idea to Lockport, New York, a small industrial city on the Erie Canal about 20 miles northeast of Niagara Falls. In the fall of 1877, Lockport gave him permission to build. He laid pipes through several blocks of downtown. He connected a boiler plant, and on January 7, 1878, he turned the system on. It worked on the first try. That is not how technology usually works. And really, it is worth stopping there for a second. Most major infrastructure systems of the industrial era, telegraph networks, water systems, early electrical grids, were messy at first. They exploded, they caught fire, they produced uneven, unreliable results. But Holly's district heating system came online in January, during a cold snap, and heated the buildings on its network without incident. Lockport noticed immediately. The businesses and homes connected to the network saw their heating costs drop substantially. Coal that no longer had to be purchased one building at a time was now bought in bulk by the central plant at a much lower per-unit cost. Maintenance expenses that building owners had once paid to keep their own boilers alive simply disappeared. Heat became something that arrived through a pipe in the basement, like water, and you paid for what you used. The news spread faster than you might expect for 1878. Within 5 years, engineers from a dozen other cities had traveled to Lockport to inspect the system for themselves. Within a decade, district heating networks were operating, or under active construction, in Rochester, New York, Denver, Colorado, St. Paul, Minnesota, Winnipeg, Manitoba, and even downtown New York City itself. The New York system deserves particular attention because it is the only major American district steam network that survived the 20th century intact and is still operating today. Built beginning in 1882 by the New York Steam Company, which eventually became part of Consolidated Edison, the Manhattan system at its peak served more than 100,000 buildings. As of the time this script was written, it still serves approximately 1,700 large commercial and residential buildings in Midtown and Lower Manhattan, including the United Nations, the Empire State Building, Rockefeller Center, and most of the large hospitals in the borough. That last detail deserves a pause. The steam pipes under Manhattan have been running continuously, with expansions and upgrades, but no fundamental redesign, for well over a century. The core of the system is older than the car. It was built before radio was invented, and it still works every single day. But Manhattan is the exception. In most American cities, the story went another way. And to understand the economics of district heating, you have to understand where the heat came from. This is the part of the story that, when people hear it, often feels almost impossible to believe was not adopted everywhere. In the industrial economy of the late 1800s, factories, foundries, and later electrical power stations burned enormous quantities of coal. The steam they produced drove machinery and generators. But the thermodynamic reality of steam engines at that time was brutal. They were deeply inefficient at converting thermal energy into mechanical work. A large share of the heat created by burning coal went straight out through the exhaust as waste. In the most literal sense, it was simply thrown away. District heating systems could capture that wasted heat. Instead of venting exhaust steam from a power plant into the atmosphere, you could pipe it into a district network and send it into buildings. The heat you were already generating, the heat you were already paying for, could do double duty. The incremental cost of heating a city block, when a power plant was already producing waste steam, was close to zero. You still needed the pipes, you still needed the distribution infrastructure, but the fuel itself was heat you were throwing away anyway. This is what energy engineers today call cogeneration, or combined heat and power. But the truth is, it is not some modern breakthrough. It is an idea from 1877. The cities that built these systems understood something in very practical terms. The most efficient energy system is one in which no useful output is wasted, and the economics became even more compelling as the network grew larger. A single central boiler plant serving 1,000 buildings was dramatically more fuel efficient than 1,000 individual boilers, even before you factor in waste heat recovery. Industrial boilers could be maintained by specialist engineers. They could run at optimal efficiency around the clock. They were not neglected or poorly adjusted the way basement boilers in individual buildings routinely were. Combustion was cleaner too, because fuel could be selected and managed centrally instead of leaving every building superintendent to buy whatever coal happened to be cheapest that week. Thomas Edison understood this. His original Pearl Street generating station in Lower Manhattan opened in 1882. The same year the New York Steam Company began operation nearby, was designed with heat recovery in mind. Edison had studied the thermodynamics. He knew electrification and district heating were natural partners. A power plant produces electricity and waste heat. The electricity goes out through wires. The heat goes out through pipes. One source, two products. Near zero marginal waste. Edison wrote about this explicitly. He described the ideal city as one where a central station served all energy needs, electricity, heat, and eventually refrigeration through a unified underground network. Cities as organisms, cities that shared resources instead of duplicating them in every basement and boiler room. But only half of that vision was fully built. The electrification half survived. The heat recovery half, in most places, did not. Or worse, it was built and then dismantled. And the reason for that had less to do with engineering than with money. By 1910, district heating systems existed in more than 100 cities across the United States and Canada. The technology had been proven, the economics had been established. Cities with these systems were paying less to heat buildings than cities without them. The only real question was how widely the model would continue to expand. Then several things happened in sequence, over roughly 40 years, that pushed the answer in the direction of contraction instead of growth. The first was the rise of natural gas as a household fuel. Natural gas had existed commercially since the 1820s, but the development of long-distance natural gas pipelines in the early 20th century, especially the massive expansion of the 1920s and 1930s, suddenly made it possible to deliver combustible fuel directly to individual buildings at low cost. Now, to be fair, natural gas was in many respects a genuinely good product. It was cleaner than coal. It was easier to manage than a coal boiler. It gave individual building owners direct control over their heat, especially in buildings outside existing district networks, which was most buildings in most cities. For those places, natural gas represented a real improvement over wood and coal. But the gas industry was not simply a passive option for buildings with no alternative. It was an aggressive commercial enterprise with a very strong financial interest in displacing every alternative, including district steam networks that already existed and already worked. This is where the revisionist part of the history matters. The standard narrative treats the decline of district heating as a natural market outcome. People preferred individual heating. Natural gas was better. The old systems were outcompeted. But when you look closely at what actually happened, city after city, that story does not hold up very well. What actually happened was a chain of contract negotiations, regulatory decisions, and infrastructure investments in which the natural gas industry held major structural advantages over municipal district heating operations. Gas utilities were private companies with shareholders, lobbyists, and legal departments. District heating systems were often semi-public operations run by municipalities or small private firms with limited political resources. So when it came time to negotiate franchise agreements with city governments, to fight rate cases before utility regulators, or to finance infrastructure extensions, the gas industry usually won, and in city after city, the pattern repeated. A district heating system reached the end of its original infrastructure life. Pipes that had been in the ground for 30 or 40 years needed replacement. The city faced a decision: reinvest in the district network, or let it decline and allow individual gas heating to fill the gap. Gas utilities had every reason to make reinvestment in district heat look expensive and risky. They offered low introductory gas rates to buildings standing right on the edge of that decision. They lobbied city councils and utility commissions for regulatory frameworks that favored individual meters over shared networks. And the individual meter, from a business model perspective, was a remarkable invention in extraction. When you heat a building from a district network, the economics naturally lean towards simple flat rates or low per-unit charges. After all, you are distributing surplus heat that otherwise would have been wasted. But when you sell gas through an individual meter, every molecule of fuel becomes a revenue event. Every unit of heat delivered becomes a transaction. The customer is no longer buying a comfortable temperature. The customer is buying combustible gas 1 cubic foot at a time, and the seller's incentive is to maximize the cubic feet sold. That distinction, heat as shared surplus versus heat as a metered commodity, sits at the center of everything that happened to American heating infrastructure in the 20th century. The individual meter model also created a kind of lock-in that district systems struggled to match. Once you install a gas furnace in a building, you have made a capital investment that can last 15 to 25 years. That building is effectively committed to gas heating for the life of that equipment. Gas utilities understood this perfectly. They often offered subsidized installation or low-interest financing for furnace equipment. In the early decades of natural gas expansion, they were not just selling fuel, they were installing 20 years of captive demand. There were, of course, genuine technical challenges that early district systems had not fully solved. Insulating steam pipes underground was difficult with the materials available in the 1880s and 1890s. Heat losses in distribution were significant. Steam at high pressure is unforgiving when maintenance fails. Leaks could be dramatic, and early systems occasionally produced highly publicized, street-level failures that gas industry interests were quick to amplify. But none of those problems were unsolvable. Pipe insulation technology improved continuously through the early 20th century. Modern district heating systems, including surviving American systems and large European networks, operate with distribution losses lower than the transmission losses in long-distance natural gas pipelines. So yes, the technical problems were real, but they were solvable, and they were solved in the countries that chose to solve them. The United States, increasingly, chose not to. World War I interrupted civilian infrastructure investment. The 1920s brought a construction boom that favored rapid individual development. The Depression dried up capital for municipal infrastructure projects. Just as many district systems needed reinvestment. World War II again redirected industrial resources, and by the time the post-war construction economy exploded in the late 1940s, building individual gas or oil heating systems into new structures was simply how things were done. The institutional knowledge behind district heating had largely dispersed. The companies that had built and operated those systems had mostly closed or converted. Then came suburbanization, perhaps the single most consequential factor in the final collapse of district heating as a mainstream American option. District heating is a density technology. It works best where many buildings sit close together and distribution distances remain short. The cost per building falls as density rises. A city block with 20 large apartment buildings is a natural candidate for district heating. A suburban street with 20 single-family houses on quarter-acre lots is not. and the post-war suburban expansion that transformed the American landscape between 1945 and 1975 was perhaps the fastest large-scale, low-density development in human history. Millions of homes were built in patterns that made district heating economically non-viable. The Federal Housing Administration's mortgage underwriting standards, which effectively defined what American housing would look like for 2 generations, favored detached, single-family homes with individual HVAC systems. Applied at national scale, those standards shaped a built environment that made district heating impossible for most new American residential stock. Natural gas prices, heavily regulated and kept artificially low through much of the post-war period, eroded the economic case for district systems even further. When gas was extraordinarily cheap, as it was through much of the 1950s and 1960s, the operating cost advantage of district heating was no longer enough, on its own, to justify major infrastructure investment. Then came 1973. The OPEC oil embargo changed American energy economics almost overnight. Heating costs for the average American household approximately tripled in real terms over the following decade. This should have been the moment when policymakers looked at what Europe was doing with district heating and decided to rebuild what had been lost. But that is not what happened. In several European countries, especially Denmark, Sweden, and Finland, district heating had never been abandoned. It had been expanded systematically as a matter of national energy policy. And when the oil shock hit in 1973, that expansion accelerated dramatically. Denmark launched a national program in 1979 to convert the majority of its urban heat supply to district heating, connected to combined heat and power plants. Over the following 2 decades, Denmark built or expanded district systems serving more than 60% of all Danish households. The efficiency gains were extraordinary. The same fuel that had once served one purpose now served 2. And Danish household heating costs, despite a severe northern climate, became among the lowest in Europe. Finland built district heating systems that today serve approximately 50% of all Finnish building space, including essentially all of Helsinki. Those Finnish systems capture waste heat from industrial facilities and power plants across the country. Sweden followed the same path. It now has district heating networks serving more than half of all Swedish residential space, built aggressively in the 1970s and 1980s, using the same basic technology Holly demonstrated in Lockport in 1877, updated with modern insulated pipes and computerized distribution. The United States, facing the same oil shock, chose a different response. The political consensus that emerged, especially after 1980, did not move toward shared infrastructure. It moved toward individual responsibility for energy costs. Insulate your own home. Buy a more efficient furnace. Put solar panels on your own roof. The response to energy was privatized in the same direction that heating had been privatized a century earlier. One household at a time, 1 meter at a time. And that contrast with Northern Europe now stands as a kind of natural experiment in energy policy. A Finnish household in Helsinki, in a climate substantially colder than most American cities, typically pays less to heat a home than an American household in Chicago or Boston. That difference is not about Finnish frugality. It is not about some magical insulation culture. It is district infrastructure capturing and distributing heat that American systems simply throw away. And the numbers are difficult to argue with. A combined heat and power plant connected to a district heating network can achieve total fuel utilization efficiency of 75 to 90%. That means that share of the energy in the fuel becomes useful heat or electricity delivered to end users. Separate power plants plus separate gas furnaces doing those same 2 jobs independently typically achieve total efficiency of only 40 to 55%. The rest is waste heat exhausted into the atmosphere. At the scale of a major city, the difference between those efficiency levels represents an enormous amount of fuel and an enormous amount of money. For the United States as a whole, the energy wasted through the absence of district heating is estimated by various researchers to equal hundreds of millions of barrels of oil annually. But that waste is not paid for evenly. The heat escaping from a power plant exhaust stack does not cost the power plant anything. The heat escaping from a building's gas furnace through its flue does not cost the gas utility anything. It costs the building owner, it costs the renter, it costs the household, it costs the business paying the heating bill. The inefficiency of the fragmented system is paid for by the end user, not by the infrastructure owners. That is not an accident. That is the business model. A gas utility's revenue is a direct function of the volume of gas consumed. A more efficient heating system, whether district steam or a modern high-efficiency furnace, is, from the utility's point of view, a customer consuming less product. Every percentage point of efficiency improvement in American heating is a percentage point reduction in gas sales. The financial interest of the fuel commodity business runs directly against the energy interest of the fuel consumer. This misalignment of incentives appears across the American energy economy, but in heating it is especially visible because the alternative was demonstrably viable, was actually built, and was actually dismantled in the face of that financial interest. There have been attempts in recent decades to revive district heating in American cities. New York's Con Edison steam system remains the largest in the Western Hemisphere, and there have been periodic proposals to expand it. Several university campuses, MIT, Columbia, Yale, and Stanford, operate district heating and cooling systems, serving their entire campuses from central plants. Some hospitals and large medical complexes run similar systems. At sufficient density, the economics still work exactly as Hawley demonstrated in 1877. Several cities have built, or are actively building, new district systems, often tied to renewable energy or waste heat recovery from industrial facilities. Seattle has a significant district steam system. St. Paul's district heating system, one of the oldest in the country, still operates. But these are exceptions within a national landscape that moved in another direction, and that landscape is now very difficult to reverse. The infrastructure decisions made between roughly 1920 and 1970 created a built environment that is dispersed, low density, and individually mechanized. Reversing course is enormously expensive. You cannot easily retrofit a district heating network into a landscape built for gas furnaces without tearing up streets, reconfiguring basements, and replacing or bypassing existing mechanical systems. The cost is real. The friction is real. And this is the final mechanism by which infrastructure capture perpetuates itself. A decision forecloses alternatives. The landscape adapts to that decision. The alternatives become progressively more expensive to return to. Then the original decision starts to look, in hindsight, like the natural result of geography, preference, and progress, rather than what it really was. A political and commercial choice made by people with financial interests in a particular outcome. The history of American district heating is a case study in how infrastructure decisions shape the range of future choices. Every city block designed around an individual gas furnace is a block that cannot easily be served by district heat. Every suburb built at 3 houses per acre is a suburb where the math of district heating does not work. Every mechanical room designed for a single-family boiler was designed, whether its designers realized it or not, around the business model of the individual meter, and the people who benefited from that business model were present when those infrastructure decisions were made. They were at the Utility Commission hearings. They were at the municipal contract negotiations. So the story of why district heating declined in America is not a story of neutral market choices. It is a story of particular actors with particular financial interests shaping what choices the market was allowed to make. That does not mean district heating was perfect. It does not mean every critic acted in bad faith. It does not mean natural gas never offered genuine value. It means the outcome. This landscape of individual meters, individual furnaces, individual fuel bills was not inevitable. It was constructed. It was chosen. And it was chosen by some people for reasons that had more to do with revenue streams than with the interests of the people paying the bills. Birdsell Hawley died in 1894. His system in Lockport kept running after his death, kept heating buildings through the late 19th and early 20th century. and eventually, like most of the systems his work inspired, was decommissioned when the economics of individual gas heating tipped against it. Energy historians know his name. Almost no one else does. Meanwhile, the infrastructure chosen instead, the gas mains, the meter boxes, the furnaces, the flues, became so common that they stopped looking like choices at all. They became the default. They became what heat means. But what heat means in Finland is different. What heat means in Denmark is different. In those places, heat means a pipe in the basement connected to a network. And that network is connected to a plant capturing heat that would otherwise be wasted. The efficiency of that arrangement is so high that household heating costs are a fraction of what many Americans pay, despite similar or colder climates. They kept building what America stopped building. They kept investing in the model America allowed to decline. The technology is the same. The physics is the same. The only real difference lies in the decisions that were made, the interests that shaped those decisions, and the infrastructure those decisions left behind. America had a different system. It worked, and the full story of why it was replaced, not the sanitized version about natural gas being more modern and better, is something people paying heating bills in January have every reason to understand. So the next time you open a heating bill that feels higher than it should be, remember Lockport, New York, on January 7, 1878. Remember that the steam pipes under Midtown Manhattan are still running, still working, still heating buildings, connected to the same basic network for more than a century. Remember that Helsinki's district system, capturing the waste heat of a northern European industrial city, warms a modern capital at a fraction of your cost per square foot. And remember this above all, the system you have is not the only system that was ever possible. Kamunlunga. If you found this useful, leave a comment, like, and subscribe, and share your thoughts with us.